I'm muting you all. And I will open up the chat box. So, as a warm-up exercise, we'll start off, are you making and creating with me today? And have you brought any pumpkins with you? As a little warm-up question to get you going. And while you're thinking about that, I will just remind you what we're doing next time. I'm being specific to say next time and not next week. It's half term next week, so it's a bit of a different format this time around. But I am taking the half term break off. And I guess those of you who've got big family groups may well be grateful for the time that you can spend with your own family or grandchildren, whoever it might be, during that half term break. So today we're going with pumpkins, vaguely Halloweenish, because is Halloween in half term or the week after? Not quite sure, but it's before the next class we meet when we're going into bonfire night. So I have actually got an example of what we're making for our bonfire night theme, and you will need to bring with you a straw wreath. My straw wreath base is 30 centimetres in diameter. And that tends to be my go-to wreath base size because it makes a good sized door wreath, good sized table arrangement. If you haven't already bought your wreath, it may be worthwhile getting one that's slightly smaller. Number one, because you'll need less materials to work with. And number two, you might find it's more convenient if you're going to actually have this table arrangement. It's not quite so big, but it doesn't matter at all. When I demonstrate next time, I may well just demonstrate on half of my wreath in order that I don't spend ages and ages trying to complete the whole lot. That shouldn't be too off-putting for you because I have got the main wreath to show you. I've also got kebab sticks, which I bought in a pack. And why don't I bring the completed elevated or floating design over, and you can have a closer look at it. So this is what we're going to be making. I made this arrangement in a class that I went to, a workshop I went to in the summer. And to make this, you can see the wreath ring, you can see my kebab sticks, these little legs that I've got. You'll also need some string because the wreath ring and the legs are bound with string. I've got my kebab sticks in here because they are supporting. Can you see my test tubes? These are my plastic test tubes I've covered in the brown stem tape, which we talked about not last week, the week before. Now I've got lots of glass test tubes. I may well just use my glass test tubes. And for the bonfire theme, you could perhaps think about using silver birch twigs. So what I've used here, I decided to use up some of my dried flower supplies, and I've got a combination of wheat, and there's lavender in here, there's yarrow and statice or limonium. I've got some poppy heads and things like that. So it's entirely up to you what you use for your material or uprights. But I thought as it was coming to bonfire season, I would make my upright pieces. I would use silver birch twigs. And then to get that sense of fireworks or flames, the option of putting either fresh or dried materials in a sort of more raised position in your design. So if I was going fireworks and flames and things like that, I would perhaps buy some orange flowers, red flowers, yellow flowers to give me the illusion of the flames. And if I wanted to go for the fireworks theme, I might just go clashing colours and add, the reds, oranges, yellows, perhaps bright pink and purples or something like that. So as ever, it's about the technique and the construction. You could make this different materials at different times of the year. So this is quite a fun project to make. In terms of specialist tools, you may well need your bradawl because we are going to be implanting all your stems into the straw wreath, and it is quite tough, and you may need to make yourself a guide hole first of all with your bradawl and then to feed your materials in. So if you've got any questions about that, you're welcome to leave them underneath the video when it goes live. Contact me in the Facebook group. And those of you who are watching live in class live at the moment, something just pinged off then, we can chat more in the make and create session afterwards. So I will just pack these away and we can get on with this week. So this week it is all about the pumpkins. So I have got you've seen this many times, my dried pumpkins. And these are last year's pumpkins, which this one I think is dried. This one, I'm not quite so sure. In fact, I think it might possibly be rotting at the bottom. And I've got a brand new fresh pumpkin. So this is what I was calling the Munchkin pumpkins. This came, actually my sister gave this to me. I'm sure she got it from the supermarket. So it would be the kind of squash that you would roast and have in your casseroles or stuffed with something else. So I'm going for quite small pumpkins. I haven't gone for the super large ones, the ones you would normally buy to carve, because I'm keeping it all quite neat and petite. And I've got a variety of glassware. I've got a little Sunday dish, which roughly fits the size of my pumpkins. I've got a slightly larger dish as well, which some of my supplies are in. I've also got my small goldfish bowl. I'm going to show you another adaptation for doing that. And then I've got a much larger dish that's akin to a modern trifle bowl, straight up and down the sides. And it's about this deep. I can't show you that because I've done a bit of prep on that and I don't want to reveal all my secrets straight away. So for the first arrangement, I will bring the camera overhead and I'm going to make this in my bowl here. It's got straight sides, but it's ever slightly fluted. Out of preference, I would have wanted a shallower bowl as well, but I've had to make do with what I've got. And I've got with me some paper covered wine. Don't be shocked. I don't think I put that on the list. I want to show you an adaptation, and that's what I'm going to use for my adaptation. I have got the bag from some satsumas, and I've got a couple of elastic bands. And these are the ones that the postie drops in the street when delivering your mail to you. I'm also going to be using some roses for this arrangement. So off to the side here, I've got just a light bunch of flowers. I have my pom-pom chrysanthemums, some roses here, and I've just got a little bit of greenery. You don't actually need the greenery, but I thought with this adaptation, I can show you how you can use greenery as well. And you'll also notice some stems of lily grass. I don't know how you've been getting on with your lily grass from the week 1 project. Certainly in some of the flower arrangements that you've been posting in the group, I've been spotting you using your lily grass. Sometimes it's been plaited or put in as a little zhuzh on the side. So it's always really great to use a new plant material. So the first project today, I'm going to take my smaller of my bowls and my net from my fruit and get making. So I will bring the camera over. I think probably today, most of what we're going to do, it will be overhead so you can see exactly what I'm doing nice and close up. So I will bring that camera in. I'm just thinking about which buttons I need to press first. So I'll bring the camera in from the side and I'll spotlight that, and then we can get going with the main part of the class. So let's get going. Now, what I'm going to show you first of all is not groundbreaking. What I wanted to show you this time for this particular project was what I was going to do to my roses. So you will have seen this before. I've got one of these fruit baskets, and it has an end piece, this sort of, so I'm getting a question, can I please ask the diameter of the top of your vase? I would say it's the other way around, that rather than saying the diameter of this top of the vase, I don't know how big it is, but when I do between thumb and forefinger, it's that big. How much is that? 12, 15 centimeters, do you think? Possibly. But what you need to do, all bags are not made equal. And I would work on the basis of how easily you can stretch your bag over your container rather than working with your container first. So I would save your bags. And what I've done here with my bag is I cut it close to this little pinched opening. So I didn't rip it. Normally I just rip them open, but I thought, because I'm going to reuse this, I'm going to cut it first. So because it has just been cut open, I've still got these little tags on it. So I'm going to pull that away with my hand and take off, I guess that's a little carry handle for the fruit, not sure. And then I've got this sort of tiny silvery bit in there. I'm not sure whether I can take that off without the whole bag coming apart. So hopefully I've cut it quite neatly and it's not going to be too disruptive to the eye. Now, the one thing I'm not going to do is, as I put this over the top, I'm going to try not to have that join bit right in the middle. I don't really want it to be the focal part of this little design. So I'm going to purposefully offset it either to one side or the other, just so that when I come and place my flowers in, hopefully the flowers will partly cover it up. But it's not the most attractive thing to look at. And I want you to look at the beauty of the flowers and not what I've got, not the funny little knotted bit at the top. I then take my elastic band, and you would probably seen this being done many times before, and then pull to tighten. Now, this isn't massively attractive. So my first adaptation of the day is to take my paper covered wire, my Oasis bind wire, and reel myself off enough that will go around my container. And I wanted to have a go at stitching this through the holes. Now, I'm not going to do this completely because it will just take me a little bit of time. So I will show you what I mean, going in and out, stitching through the container. Imagine that you've gone all the way around. And once you've gone all the way around, I'm not going to go all the way around because that's going to take me a little bit of time, but I'll definitely do that when we make and create afterwards. That you would stitch, stitch, stitch all the way around. So you'd end up with something that looked more like a shower cap. And then you would twist and tie it in place. And I think just having that paper covered wire there, it's a smaller line, it is slimmer. And when I do this for real afterwards, my netting is, it's not a deep red, it's sort of a pinky red, but I've definitely got some of this red bind wire. So I would put my elastic band on first, and then I would do a stitch round as an option with my paper covered wire. And then once I was happy that was actually sturdy, you've got the option then of cutting away your elastic band. If the stitching is too intricate for you, you don't need to cover the elastic band up. You could just leave it there. You could think perhaps of putting a ribbon over the top of it if you wanted to get rid of it, or make it really obvious. Sometimes, you know, the elastic band's quite thick. You could cover it up with something else. It may be that you've got some coloured wool, not just one round of wool, but how about, you know, intentionally going over and over and over to cover up the functionality and the attractiveness of the elastic band. So you've got several options there, and you will decide what you want to do. So what I will do then is, once everything is firmly fixed, this joining bit isn't very pretty to look at. I'm going to cut that off. And then what do you do with the bits that are hanging out afterwards? So you could try and cut them, option one. It's a little bit how, you know, the sort of frill. If you ever bought homemade jam from a Christmas market that has the little cotton hat on the top, you could cut this out, you know, a couple of centimetres underneath and just leave that frilling upwards. Don't cut it too short though, because if anything moves here, you'll find that the whole lot of your netting becomes loose. Or it may be that you might want to accentuate the outer edge here and let it flow a little bit. Perhaps you think that adds a little bit of, you know, sort of spider's web bars. It's entirely up to you. So what I've ended up, because I've offset my little fixing here, now I've got a short length of the netting this side and slightly longer the other side. So I am going to, for speed and sort of evenness, I'm going to just trim off my net so it's approximately the same depth all the way around. And you can, you know, fiddle around with that too. This is an arrangement to be viewed from above. So as long as it looks good on the side and you're happy with, nothing's going to fall apart, that'll be fine. So you can see these distracting wires sitting out here. I am only leaving them long for the purposes of filming, because I know I want to neaten that up later. And if I twist it together now, I won't get it undone. Well, perhaps I ought to, just so it's not distracting. So what you can do is either cut your strings really, really tightly off, or what I like to do when I use my paper covered wire is I take the long stem of the paper covered wire and I wrap it round and round. So I'm creating like a little rosette or a little sort of button feature here. And it's just a nice way of getting it off. If you do cut your paper covered wire down, if you decide to go with this option, I'm just going to tuck that tiny little cut bit behind. I always feel you run the risk that it's a bit like if you make a knot and then you cut the loose ends of the knot too close to the knot, it sort of undoes it a little bit. So we need to be secure with our mechanics, but always striving for that decorative finish. And of course, working with glassware, that streamlined look, everything is on display. So you just need to have a little bit of a thought to how you're going to finesse your design a little bit. So I'm going to bring in my roses next. So I will go over to my flower bucket. So I am using roses that I've already had. So my vaguely Halloween-y autumn theme is decidedly pink. I did think about spraying my roses orange, but I thought, well, work with an eau naturel. So what I'm going to do here, they're too long for my container. The idea is I want them to rest into my container. So I can measure up, because I haven't got any water in here yet, and I will know exactly where to cut my flower stem. Now, ideally, I would have wanted to use a shorter container, but I only had one short glass container. So I'm cutting my stem quite long because I'm conscious that if I cut it short, even though, because I want this sort of top arrangement, then it may wobble around a bit. And the head of the rose, I don't want it spilling out anywhere. So that's why I'm keeping it short. And also, I think it looks better, even though I said it's an arrangement to be viewed from above, a sort of coffee table design. I will catch glimpses of it, and I personally prefer to see my flowers sort of anchored to the bottom of the vase rather than, hovering somewhere up here. It's just personal preference. So the technique that I wanted to show you with a particular rose, and I am going to just pull off that. I can pinch the sepal off there, the protective petal. It's distracting me. My rose is, I've had it for probably a week now. It's starting to open out, so it's doing quite well for supermarket rose, but I want a slightly different look to it. So I'm going to pull part of my rose apart. And again, you've got options. If you don't want to do this, don't do it. But if you fancy having a go, and especially like me, if your roses are a few days old, you've got nothing to lose, really. You've enjoyed them as your cut flower. And if it all goes wrong for you, don't try it again, or put it down to experience, or have another go another time. So I'm taking my 2 fingers and the thumb, and I'm burying down into my flower head, because I'm going to pinch slightly, squeeze and pull. Oh, can you hear the noise? I don't know if you heard that. And I'm changing the shape of my flower. So it's a little bit, we talked about leaf manipulation before, when we've made our lily grass from the flat sword-like pieces, and we made them into balls and into squares to use as flower frogs. I have made my common garden supermarket rose, which aren't the most exciting flowers, into something that looks a little bit more, perhaps like a wild rose, and just changes the shape a little bit. So that is our first arrangement with this unusual looking flower. And what I'm going to do, I want to cover up my little join for my basket where the net join together. Put that there. It will start to cover that up. All I need to do is add water. Do not throw the petals away. We will be using those again. So let's have one more go. See how you feel about this. So I just need to measure up. There. Cut my stem to length. Holding my rose in my hand. Going in. I don't think, perhaps this time I'll take a little bit less out of the middle. So just sort of delving down. A little bit of a twist. I don't know whether the, I'm certainly hearing a sort of sound, almost like a squeaky sound as I pull the petals. I don't know whether the camera is picking that up, but just go slowly and carefully. And it may be, if you think, well, actually, I prefer my roses to be as they originally occurred, that is what you want to do, just keep them as they originally occurred. Now, I can play around with things here. Because my pumpkins are really light, I can rest those on top of my container. If you've got any fake pumpkins, you know, plastic ones or ones that have been felted, I think they're quite of the moment. I've seen those for sale actually in my local supermarket. You could balance other things on the top, but that was just a different way. The purpose of this arrangement today was to show you the technique of taking out the centre of your roses to create a more open form. So I'm going to move this one out of the way. I may well reuse my pumpkins, so I will push that to one side. Now, the second arrangement, do you remember I suggested that you bring some double-sided tape to class? So double-sided tape, obviously that's pot tape, not double-sided. I've got wide tape, and I also have a narrow tape. I went for the narrow tape this time because I didn't want all the opening of my container to be filled up with quite wide sections of tape. What do you do if you don't have any double-sided tape? You could revert to good old pot tape, or you could use normal sellotape. And what we're going to be doing is creating a grid. So I'm sure you know this technique. You put your tape across and you layer it up and you keep going across like this. So it's like noughts and crosses, tape, 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 and then you tape the other way too. If you're using glassware, you would either want to use your pot tape that is see-through, or you would want to use sellotape. Just bear in mind that you'll need to have a really, really dry container because your tape won't adhere if your container is wet at all. What do you do though if you haven't got double-sided tape? Because we're going to use the stickiness of our tape on the top surface. So what you'll need to do if you haven't got double-sided tape is adapt. So you would put your tape on normal way with the sticky side down. I'll do this. And then you would need to twist your tape, bring it across, and then twist it on the back side. To demonstrate that, I'm going to have to be a little bit more generous with the tape I'm using. Let's have another go. Use an exaggeratedly long piece of tape. So you would tape down. You would twist the tape so your sticky side was up. And when you got to the other side, you would twist it back again. So it's fiddly. You just need to make sure that you have enough tape to play with that you can get the twist in the side in order that the top surface is sticky. So as I said before, I did do a little bit of prep ahead of time. And the reason being that my tape has got the paper back into it. If you have the tape that comes on the dispenser, it's sticky on both sides straight away, and it's a much faster job. So I have already gone both ways with my grid, and this is my absolute favourite container. I wish I had two of these. I would have preferred my first arrangement to be slightly shorter. So you can see that I've got my grid going across, and the reason why I've got two-tone grid is because I have starting myself off with the peeling of the tape. Now this looks really easy, and the only reason I'm finding it so easy to do is because I have rubbed down on my tape. Sometimes the tape doesn't want to come up, so you have to exaggeratedly rub it down on the edge and then pick it up. And I have just started all these pieces of tape off in order that I didn't have to detach the tape under the pressure of filming. So we've got the grid, and I should say, of course, I should have put water in my other flowers. As you know, I don't really like putting water in my arrangements as I work and get very nervous that I'm going to spill my flowers and my water everywhere. So for this arrangement, this putting together, as I say, I'm going to take advantage of the stickiness of my tape. And this is why I have saved my flower petals. So I can reuse them almost as if, you know, you could be quite defined about this and perhaps try and recreate a very open flat rose on the side, or just layer up. So again, it's all that sort of mindful part of flower arranging and having a craft. I could come in with my short roses and put those in there and have that as the base of my arrangement, and then have the flowers, petals coming out and spilling out across the container. It's entirely up to you. And if you absolutely love taking the centre out of your roses, of course, you could carry on and take the centre out of your roses. Now, what I'm going to do as well here is to take some of my excess, my surplus lily grass that we used from week 1. I've still got some stems that are looking fine and dandy. And I could perhaps start to weave those in and get a little bit of natural movement. So I'm going to cut them to a point, just as if I am threading a needle through, and whether I can lift that round. Let's have a look, going underneath like that, and to come through. There's a little bit like the swirls we did when we had the big tangle of the lily grass, that you could do that as well, to come through and just to create a little bit of movement as you're going around, and just decide how many times you want to go around, what suits the arrangement you're doing, and just bringing that through. So bearing in mind the tape is sticky on both sides, I could anchor that there just by applying a bit of pressure over the top. I have got this little stubby bit here, which isn't massively attractive, but now I have used the sort of strong stem end. I can cut that off if you feel it doesn't suit the look that you're after. Now, what I've got here are the tangles that we used. And for those of you asking how long your bear grass will last, this hasn't been in water the whole time, so it's lasted, you know, a good few weeks. But I could even perhaps cut some of those pieces up and lay those across the container as well, starting to make a patchwork, starting to disguise the fact that I've got the tape there. So the tape is doing its job. It's not invisible. For me, looking at this, it almost looks as the colour of masking tape. And it depends on the look that you're after. Is it going to be looking a little bit out of place? Do you want to cover it up? So you can definitely use your excess bare lily grass for this. Or how about it's the autumn season? If you want to embrace the autumn season, but you don't want to go all Halloweeny and orange pumpkins, that you could be collecting leaves. You could be pressing the leaves if you wanted them flat. You know, I think this look really great with one type of leaf, you know, perhaps loads of lovely oak leaves. Or I've just managed to walk in some silver birch leaves, got caught on the end of my boots when I was out in the garden this morning. That would look lovely, as if it was that sort of pile of leaves, you know, when you go for an autumn walk and you see all the, you know, my favourite thing is I'm a bit naughty really. I see the groundsman at the local park have put the leaves together. There's nothing nicer than kicking your way through those leaves. So I've gone quite loose and open here. This, again, it's for demonstration purposes. I quite like the look of that. Again, if you wanted to cover up every little bit of the tape, just need to start layering up and do it in more layers than I'm going to do here. But you can see this is something that you can really get creative with, and a great way of using up all those bits and pieces you've got left over. I don't know if you're anything like me, but you have all sorts of things that sort of get left at the bottom of your flower bucket, and then eventually you think, oh gosh, they've all gone a bit off, I'm going to just throw the whole lot away. Wouldn't this be a really lovely way of using some of your excess materials up, but in a more creative and decorative way? I think probably the best things to use, trying to just preempt some of your questions, would be things that were flatter in form, rather than to get, obviously the rounded shapes you can put through the holes. But I think this particularly lends itself to your flatter style materials. Here I've taken the little pieces of lily grass out over the edge of the container, so I'm not being constrained by the roundness of the container. It doesn't suddenly stop. So again, it's up to you whether you keep things inside the lines or whether you want to go a little bit outside the lines too, like that. So it's turning out to be an arrangement of two halves. Again, it's just to give you a little bit of, just a bit of thinking space. What could I do with this? How could I do this? And to use up those materials in a more interesting kind of way. So again, you can see how I might develop that, and I will be developing that in our Make and Create session later. So how about we move on to the third of the day and think about the little pumpkins I've brought in and creating another kind of mesh to hold your natural materials in place. So we've had the fruit net, we've had the grid tape, and this time making a mesh, but using flower stems to do that. So I'm just going to go lean across and bring in my chrysanthemum blooms and show you how I'm going to use those. So this is what I've got in mind. So I was lucky enough this week that when my regular delivery of flowers came, that it included the perfect chrysanthemums for me. This is exactly what I had in mind. So it's these little button type chrysanthemums. You could do it with the daisy type of chrysanthemums, or the more common variety, but I was just thinking perhaps the daisy kind would be a little bit too frilly and would dilute the look I was going for. So what I'm going to do is cut all those stems off the main stem, the side shoots. Depending on the bunch that you choose, this is either going to work or it's not going to work. And it will depend on the size of the container you're going to use. And you see here that when I get to the top, the stem length is shorter. So I've got some longer length stems, which I know are going to work. It's just pot luck. Whenever you buy spray chrysanthemums, you don't know whether you're getting a stem with short stems on it or with the longer stems. So just be aware, just not so much wary as just be mindful when you do this, that the particular stem that you've got might not work particularly well. So I'm taking my Sunday dish and I'm coming back to my pumpkin that I know it fits, it sort of rests on top. I've also got this pumpkin here that just sits nicely inside. And I'm thinking, actually, this is the better sized pumpkin for this particular arrangement. And what I'm going to do is to create an interlocking grid of my flower stems here. Now, because my container is small, there is a slight risk that as I put my flower stems in, did you see that? They are going to tumble out because the heads are heavier than the stem. There isn't a sufficient length of stem to hold them in place. So it'll be one of those little pieces where it will just test your patience, really. And it's going to be a tiny bit fiddly. But when you add your pumpkin on top, that will rest everything and hold it in place. So I will show you what I'm going to do here. And again, this will need water. The reason I'm not putting it in is because I just know as soon as I start pouring in, it's going to dribble. Now this is resting where I want it to rest. I've got the flower stem on the outer edge, and I've got the stem as long as it can possibly be pointing out to the opposite side of the container. Again, if you go too short, well, I guess you could go short. But I just feel the shorter you go, the more vulnerable it comes to not staying where you want it to go. So I'm going to be brave and cut my flower stems to the same length. And I'm pulling off the little leaves. I want these nice clean stems here. And we will see whether I can use just the one bunch or whether I need to use my second stem. That one there looks just about the right size. So I'm going to put them in, and then I'm going to try and get them to interlock. I'm going to lie the stem over the one before. So what I'm hoping to do is to create a continuous circle of these little heads going round the edge of the container. And you can see here, it's a feat of balance. I'm going to use that one. I might not use that one. The head size is quite consistent. And I think if I put that one in, it might just look a little bit different, but I shall use that. I've got one here. So going over the top and coming round. Can I use this one here, the larger one? I will give that a go, cutting off all those flower heads. Just measure it up against that one and reduce the stem length a little bit. Getting that to balance across. So it looks like I'll need 2 or 3 more to complete my circle. I shall measure up against my one that was too small in size of head, like that, across the top there. And ooh, you can see that little spider's web I'm getting across the top. And as I put them down, I'm always aiming to put the next flower head over the stem of the flower head before. In that way, this flower is weighting down. This one, it's weighting down. This one, it's weighting down. This one, it's weighting down. That one, all the way around like that. So I've gone around the circle twice, and I've created this little nest area here. So the moment of truth is, will that support my little pumpkin over the top? And it does. And that was the little arrangement that I wanted to show you. Again, it needs water. And again, I'm going to use a little bit of extra detail from week 1. Do you remember that I showed you how to split down this was Formium Tenax, which I effectively brushed using my metal pin holder. So this has gone a little bit dry, and I kept it on the skewer so it's curled around. And again, to accentuate that nest look, I'm going to wrap that round. You could do the same thing with sisal and just have that growing around there. So it's just sort of brings your eye round in that sort of, it's continuing the circle look. You've got the circle of the chrysanthemums and then a little circle around the edge. And again, this is a feat of balance. This is all quite lightweight. It's quite dainty. If I go too heavy on this, I just run the risk that I just pull everything out of place a little bit. This piece, I don't know if the camera's picking it up. It's too big, it's wayward. I just go in, pinching that down. And that would be your third little arrangement. So I would see this if I was having, an autumn dinner party. I would set out my place setting, and this would be like a little favour really for each guest that I would probably put on the placemat, and then it could be moved off to the side. So if you think that's all a little bit too fiddly for you, the option, you'll be thinking, well, why did I need my goldfish bowl, Julie? This is the reason for the goldfish bowl. I knew that my chrysanthemums are really, really short. So I've got my goldfish bowl here. And again, reusing my materials from last week with the excess foliage, the excess eucalyptus parvifolia, I have done exactly the same thing that I did with my chrysanthemums. So I've cut a piece of the chrysanthemum, which I know is going to fit into my container, and then gone through and cut it off the main stem of my eucalyptus. And then, because I like the clean line inside the water, I've taken off the leaves that are going to be inside the container. So I can go through and measure up. And again, you could go quite thick with this, depending on how much eucalyptus you've got left, or go sort of eucalyptus light. It's entirely up to you. Putting them over in exactly the same way, interlocking them round. I've got some pieces that are just straight up and down, some are slightly more branched. Push them round and round the container in exactly the same way, just to give you that nice leafy edge. It's almost got the look of a hand-tied bouquet put into the vase. And I guess if you were happier using your hand-tied bouquet skills, that you could make a little posy of the eucalyptus in your hand first, and then push that into the vase. And if I take my, looking all a bit shaggy there, but it sort of simplifies it and flattens out a little bit. And again, you're getting this nested effect with your container there. And again, just giving a lightweight seasonal look, and trying to use pumpkins in a more decorative way that doesn't sort of say spooky, scary, you know, trick or treaty and all those kinds of things. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll close off this camera now for the moment, and then I can show you from the side what everything looks like, and then we can wrap up. So what did you think? So we've gone for quite a modern, sophisticated look. So a goldfish bowl, and I think it does quite look like a hand-tied bouquet with a pumpkin put in the middle. And again, I have gone, you know, perhaps I've cheated a little bit because my pumpkins were dried out, most of them. They were quite lightweight. So you're going to have to do what we said about with the mesh nest at the beginning. You need to be matching your pumpkin to your container. So I can get away with a bit of artistic license because I know whatever I do, my lightweight pumpkins aren't going to squash or my materials or fall down inside the vase. That's the key watchword, really. You don't want your pumpkin to be hovering in the little mesh that you're creating for it, not to have fallen through the arrangement, unless of course, you know, you actually wanted to tuck smaller pumpkins inside your vase. So that is the goldfish design there. And then this is exactly the same technique, but the little sundae glass and that little nest of chrysanthemum stems there. And I just didn't put in the smallest one because for me, I just felt it was the wrong size. So I was just trying to really finesse what I was doing and go for the same sort of sized chrysanthemum heads so they all fitted together. I don't know about you, but I quite like this. I think this is my favourite one. There I tip it up towards you, but you've seen a good overview of that. So although I've used the clear tape, it is still visible. You can see it rather pronounced right alongside. I could trim that off with a knife and trim them all to the same level. Again, I could perhaps even, you know, now I've used the pink, I could either, you know, get a pink ribbon around the edge, or perhaps even with my excess lily grass here, it would take me 2 pieces of lily grass and I could just disguise those bits of tape and then peel up the excess and just trim it back. So it's about finessing your work once you've grasped the technique. And we'll have to talk about this later in the Make and Create session. What did you think about my roses when I have taken out the centre, open it out and make it into a much more almost sort of garden rose or a hedgerow rose? So you'll either be loving that or you'll be telling me off for spoiling my flowers. So quite a nice one to do. It's sometimes just nice just to manipulate materials a little bit, just so you can give them a little bit of a different look. So what I'm going to do now is to stop the recording and I'll say goodbye to everybody who's watching on catch up. And then we'll move to our live Q&A, and I can find out whether you've been working along with me or what ideas and what adaptations you might have to really make this project your own.